And we're here with Connor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. Bruins are done with their little Southwest road swing. Interesting road trip. Beat the Avs. They were depleted, so that is, it's a win, but there were quite a few injuries on that Avalanche team. Lose to the Arizona Coyotes in a interesting ending.
As we
One of
all
those,
expected.
yes, just as we drew up. And then on Sunday night, no Patriots. Instead, honestly, at this point, I mean, it's
An
not even. I
actual
mean,
good team.
obviously, we are in favor of watching the Bruins over the Patriots because it's kind of our jobs. Um, but I think Boston would rather watch the Bruins right now than the Patriots. I don't even think it's close. Um, so
I
yeah,
agree. I concur.
crazy. I don't think that's a controversial statement. Bruins Knights. Bruins pull out the 3-1 win over. They get the revenge on Bruce Cassidy finally in Vegas. But and Vegas, by the way, was missing quite a few pieces. Eichel,
Yeah.
Petrangelo, Shea Theodore. Still though, solid West Coast road swing. And one thing that stood out to me on Sunday, and it stood out to me this whole season, we've talked about it a little bit, is the Bruins' depth. Bruins' depth right now. I mean, again, you look at Sunday, Bergeron scores the first goal, DeBrusk scores the second, Coyle scores the third, right? Three different lines, pretty much. DeBrusk is up on the first line, but again, that's production from all over the top six, and Coyle being in that third line center. And you had Montgomery shuffling the lines and it working out. I think it just hits on this, Connor, and we've talked about this a little bit during the season, but their depth is what's going to kind of propel them through the rest of the season and feels like a real strength, down the road for the playoffs.
Yeah, I think especially look at that last game against Vegas, and you're right. I think kind of Montgomery made all the right moves in terms of how the lineup reshuffles were. I mean, again, it's not really breaking new ground. Like, oh crap, our 5-on-5 offense isn't doing that well. I'll put Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak together again. What do you know? They put them together. I think it was only like 2 minutes together, and they scored that first goal against Vegas. But you look at the way the rest of it worked out, whether it's Charlie Coyle getting a guy like Foligno who fits in well with how that kind of puck possession kind of mantra is for that line. They lead to a goal, and then you credit where it's due in that second line. Obviously, DeBrusk gets that goal. Taylor Hall does a lot of the dirty work on that play, fighting along the boards in the neutral zone, but Pavel Zacha, who steps in for David Krejci again, who is out. Again, are we looking maybe too far ahead to be like, oh, Zacha, maybe he is like a potential top six candidate down the road? I don't want to get there yet, but when you look at just how Zacha has played so far in those stretches where he has to kind of step in for Krejci, he's been solid. Like, I mean, it was a great setup for DeBrusk's goal, but I think it was Scott McLaughlin who tweeted it yesterday. I think Zacha leads the Bruins in 5-on-5 assists. She asked
Oh,
me who it
wow.
would be at the
I didn't
start
know
of the
that.
year. I would not really expect it. But when you think about it, I think he has like 14, 15 assists, and most of them have been, not really getting a lot of power play time. So he's a guy that I think has been a pleasant surprise this year in terms of, I think he's underrated in terms of, you look at, I think some of his details, a lot of his play along the boards has been really, really good, but he also has had some really good plays in terms of setting up guys. So again, don't want to get too far ahead to be like, well, and like if Bergeron and Krejci's gone next year, like they got Zacha, which one is not true because also they got to pay him and he's setting himself up for a nice little pay
Yes.
raise.
That's the thing. It's only 1 year
But
deal.
all things considered, he is someone that is, just another sign of just the fact they've got so much depth that this guy that, when they traded for him, seemed like an intriguing candidate. You asked a lot of people who were Devils fans, they're like, he sucks. Like, just wait, he had like, I think his first goal, and I think more of my replies were not excited Bruins fans. It was like random people from like Hoboken who were like, that's gonna be the only goal he scores. So I'm like, all right, geez, like what did Zacha do when he was there with New Jersey? But I think he's been really solid, and he's again just a sign of how much depth you have. That this guy can step into such a critical part of the lineup at the 2C spot, and the Bruins really don't miss a beat.
Well, yeah, I tweeted the video of him missing that wide open net a few weeks ago, and
Yes.
I'm still getting quotes and replies from Devils fans being like, "Oh, Boston's seeing what Zacha's true colors are," and it's like, no, like if you watch him play, yeah, I mean, yeah, he's 3 goals this year, whatever. As you said, he leads the Bruins in 5-on-5 assists. I don't think anybody knew that. Just given that it's a surprising statistic. At the same time, though, you just look at where he places himself on the ice. And you said the board play and stuff like that. Very effective. Now, again, and I do want to go there right now, looking down the road, because this is something we would evaluate throughout the year. If this is Krejci and Bergeron's last year, that's an if. Again, you have Bergeron in that behind the B segment saying, I'm not leaving. Is he serious there? I think that's just kind of a spur of the moment thing. I don't think he was announcing it. Credit to the cameraman though, for turning around to catch that. Because again, if he didn't get that, if he didn't turn around to get Bergeron doing that, we'd all be like, who said that? Who was the one that said that? Whose mouth did that come from? But again, I do think it's an interesting thing thinking about Zacha as the 2C next year. Again, as you said, they got to pay him, which is not easy because he is setting himself up for a little payday. I don't know. I love the idea of Zacha. I kind of compare to Coyle a little bit, where it's like, I love the idea of them as a depth center or a depth forward, someone you can put up on the second line when need be. But I'm not quite sold yet on, can you be a consistent second line center? Now, you can make the argument that Zacha has been more effective than Krejci this year in certain instances, but I still look at Krejci's history and go, okay, well, he's a proven 2C. How do you feel about Zacha down the road as, next year, the 2C potentially?
Yeah, I think it's probably on the same wavelength as you, where I think he's a very good player. I think he's, very effective in what his role is, but it's, again, same as Coyle, where it's like, all right, great 3C, can be a 2C in a pinch and be pretty solid for 5-6 games if Krejci's out, but over an 82-game span, that's where I think he can run into some trouble, where I think it's the consistency, night in, night out, that would be the biggest concern, where if he's in that spot, granted, if you give him Taylor Hall and Jake DeBrusk or something like that, maybe that helps a little bit, but you also we kind of had the same argument last year when it was Coyle and Hall, which I don't know what has changed, but look at them last year and just didn't mesh. Like, you would think that, all right, Charlie Coyle has the skill, has the talent to be a 2C, especially if he's being put on a line with guys that can really drive play like Hall. Just didn't work out last year. So that's the thing you run into, where you can tell yourself that these guys can, consistently play in a 2C spot night in, night out. But it's another challenge entirely when it's, he's your only option, right? Like, that's the thing, is the Bruins, it works right now, but they still do have David Krejci. Like, they can still, once he gets back, he's still clearly going to be that 2C spot for them. So I think it's something where, can he fill in for right now? Yes. And who knows what the situation is next year? Like, he might be their only option. And who knows, he could be a spot where he's a 2C, and just because he doesn't hit 60 points like Krejci might hit this year, he can still be effective at 45 points. But still, I think it's just the ceiling is not quite what you get with a guy like Krejci. But then again, there are a few 2Cs like David Krejci out there. So,
and Zacha's a UFA, correct? Or he will be?
I believe he is. Yeah, I think this kind of ate up his last year of restricted free agency. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure he's due for a pretty nice pay raise, regardless of what exactly the structure is. But
you worry a little bit about other teams. He likes it here. I mean, I don't think he's like against Boston, but I'm just saying, like, not comparing him to Bogarts like we did with Pastrnak on Thursday, but team comes along who, might want a potential 2C. I don't know. I'm not saying he's going to leave, but again, I think it's an interesting case. I think we talked about in the preseason of, can he be, a second line center in the future? I think they kind of view that. And Sweeney even mentioned that when they traded for him, as someone who could potentially fill in that role, down the line in his career. But again, I mean, you just look at the depth on the Bruins. I think they have 6 players or 7 above 20 points. You have Pastrnak, who's, got 38, outstanding up at the top, but you also have Marchand, I think it's 21 and 19. McAvoy isn't 20, but he does have 14 points in 14 games. He's still at a point per game pace. You have Bergeron, DeBrusk, and you have Foligno. Everyone's producing. Everyone's producing, and the depth is working. And we said this at the beginning of the season. We'll say it throughout the rest of the season. That's what's going to be carrying them. Something that could carry them, though, if they used some athletic greens. If they used our next partner, Athletic Greens, which I use literally every day. I started taking AG1 because I wanted better gut health and more energy. I don't drink coffee or use caffeine because I wanted healthier natural energy, and AG1 has been providing it in droves. Doesn't taste like it's super healthy or anything either. Has a mild tropical taste, that I actually look forward to each and every morning, like that weather behind you. That's definitely not New England, though. That's definitely not Massachusetts.
Sure isn't.
Not after
Sure is
yesterday.
not.
So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75, yes, 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source adaptogens, ingredients, and probiotics to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all the things. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free. It contains less than a gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, no artificial anything, while still tasting really, really good. And this all supports better sleep quality and mental clarity, which are two cases we can get behind. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. Just a scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. Just a scoop, just a single scoop. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Bruins. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/Bruins to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. So let's move on to the goaltending, which has been a very nice surprise for the Bruins. Linus, we'll start with Ullmark and then we'll go to Swayman because I think Swayman's going to be the one that we kind of dive into the most. Linus Ullmark, 16-1-0, 9 straight wins, leads the league in goals saved above average per 60, at the top of the league in most every advanced analytic. There are other very valuable Vezina candidates. Karaj Vamelka from the Coyotes, who just, my God.
Looked like one on Friday, that's for sure.
That dude deserves, they won't do it because they're the Coyotes, but that dude deserves money for the shots he has to take, for every night, the amount of rubber that gets sent his way. And the fact that he is, a top 5 goalie statistically in almost every stat is incredible. But again, Ullmark's been outstanding. I mean, he almost looks different this year. I know he's better, obviously, but he looks different. I'm not a goalie guy. I can't sit here and be like, oh, he's moving better. Like, he just looks different. He's saving everything. And we talked about this a little bit, I think, a few weeks ago. But if he continues on this pace, right? This happened to Rask a little bit. I think it was 2019-20 when Hellebuck was on a tear. And Hellebuck was kind of like the Felix Hernandez with the Mariners, where he would have an incredible ERA, just not a lot of wins because the team wasn't that good. Do you think Ullmark has a real shot at the Vezina?
I think he does. If he keeps up these numbers, I mean, these are like video game numbers. Like if we're looking at this in late January, February or something, and he's still at, something like, 28-3 or something like that with like a .930 save percentage. Yeah, like he's got to be in the running. Like I don't care. And again, that's to say he's going to be like a finalist. Like, is he the front runner? It's going to depend, I think, as you said, on how these guys like Hellebuck, who's been really good for a team that wasn't expected to be very good. If I can't even say his name,
I think it's
Vamelka, yeah. If he continues to play really, really well for a very bad team, he's going to be in the mix. But at the very least, Ullmark should be like a top 3 finalist if he's playing this way. And yes, you can talk about the Bruins are the best team in the league. They've got a really, structured zone defense. I think you look at this last game against Vegas. Yes, the Bruins' depth scoring finally broke through, but this game would have been 3-0 in favor of Vegas if it wasn't for Ullmark standing on his head early on, right? I mean, he has those 2 breakaway saves against Ben Hutton, William Carrier. And I agree with you, Evan. It's like, I don't know the technical details, but he just seems like a completely different goalie in terms of how poised he is. You're not seeing the things we saw last year where, whether it's just his the way his approach was or how comfortable he was, whether it was, giving up a lot of rebounds, which was a problem from last year, or just like those 50-50 kind of scoring chances where you're like, all right, if we're going to let this up, like last year, there was a couple where it'd be a breakaway. You're like, all right, here it comes. Like, it's a tough play anyway, but you're not seeing that. You're almost expecting him to just make that, make the proper move to like seal off the post or, block the shot or what have you. It just seems like it's natural now that you don't even have to really question it in terms of just how locked in he is. So yeah, it's something where you look at the baseline numbers. It's tough it's not like he's just been consistently good. He's putting up pretty solid numbers, but his record is crazy. This isn't like Rick Porcello on the 2016 Red Sox, where he was pretty good, but he wasn't like 21-3 good.
Yeah.
Like he's I'm trying to think of like a good analogy, but he's like, he's won like 25 games with like a 2.20 ERA. Like he's backing it
Yes.
up in terms of what his play is as well. It's not just the product in front of him that's kind of inflated his record. So yes, you can make the argument that if you want to view the Vezina as the same vein as the Hot Trophy, where maybe it's most valuable in terms of best overall, which is you can fall down that kind of slippery slope. Regardless of that, of who kind of steps into that role, at the very least, I think Ullmark has to be a finalist, at least right now, barring a huge drop off in the months ahead. And I mean, he's playing like a guy that should warrant praise as a top 3 goalie in this league.
Well, again, I just look at there have been so many of these 16 wins that they don't win without him. Like
Yeah.
it's not like he's, as you said, it's not like it's and I'm not trying to throw anybody on the bus, but like with Quinnipiac, right? Yanni Peretz, terrific goalie, gets like 16 shots a game because Quinnipiac is so freaking good in front of him, and he gets aided from that. This isn't that. Ullmark is getting a lot of shots. Ullmark is saving a lot of high danger chances. Maybe not as much as like a team like Anaheim gives up, or Chicago, or LA. That terrible defense out in LA with the Kings. But again, I still look at Ullmark and say, my God. And to think that you're getting his last year, it was, that money's not the greatest way they could have been spending it. Now it's different. Now you've got a real value piece there in net with Ullmark, who's been outstanding. And again, it's tough because, they have 5 straight home games coming up, as you know, which is, wild that they've just had this many home games in the first half. Do they use Ullmark for most of them? I don't know. What's interesting is we'll move on to Swayman now. Swayman's been different this year. I tweeted this after the game against Arizona. Hasn't really found his groove yet this year. Obviously had the injury for a bit of time. Can't hold that against him. Just really hasn't got into any groove. Again, like 4 goals on 16 shots against the Coyotes. That's not horrible, but that's not good. That's the Coyotes. They weren't all his fault. But that last goal was weird. I still think he probably should have played it a little bit better than he did. Whatever. I think you're going to start to see more and more people worry about Swayman. Look, he hasn't looked amazing. I don't think he's looked terrific. At the same point, though, he's young. He's young. He's played in what? Is it 8 starts? It's been 8 starts, I
believe
think.
so, yeah.
I don't put a I'm not ready to write him off.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody should be. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you look at the progression of young goalies and kind of the path they take. I think this is something we even talked about probably back in like 2021 when he first burst onto the scene in terms of not getting swept up to it, in terms of all these young goalies rarely have like a linear path of progression. There's times where guys hit walls or they struggle once teams get more of a book out on them in terms of what to expect. That just happens unless you're a all-world goalie who just seems like they're invincible out there. Like every goalie hits their lulls, especially early on when they're 23, 24, 25, trying to set themselves up in the league. I think you're kind of seeing that a little bit from Swayman now in terms of, teams are identifying areas, are shooting high on him. They're finding ways to try to beat him. And again, that's what good teams do. That's what pros do in terms of finding that inside edge to beat goalies. And now it's kind of falls on Swayman and Bob Essenza and those guys to kind of fix those tweaks. But I don't think this is a situation where just because he's in a lull to start this year means that, his progress is stalled or it's something you have to be worried about unnecessarily. I think you look at some of his play. I think I was looking up kind of diving into his numbers. I think he's 5th amongst all goalies this year in high danger save percentage. So it's one of those things where it's all right. It's good that he's stopping a lot of shots like that. Like he's bailing them up from some grade A chances. Got to tighten up against like the mid-level shots, right?
That was like Halak a little bit. I'm not comparing
yes,
them, but Halak had that
that's
same problem.
Exactly what it was. Yeah, it was kind of those shots from low danger or from kind of like that, midway through the slot or something that would beat him kind of clean. That's been the issue. So he's still there. There's still talent. There's still plenty to work with if you're a guy like Goldie Bob in terms of what Swayman brings. And his poise, his technical ability, all that stuff. You just got to work through it. And if you're the Bruins, you got to kind of keep on plugging away, even if that leads to over the next couple of weeks another loss or two where maybe if it was Ullmark, you would have, gotten away with those 2 points. The most important thing is still getting Swayman on the right track and having him play and be confident, because not only do you need him to continue to play well and try to get more consistency out of him, but it's just part of the overall machine, right? Like you can't have Ullmark play 60 plus games. Like it's just not feasible for a guy that, his career high in games played in a season was 41, and it was last year. Like Ullmark's a guy that, if you looked at one of maybe the few knocks against him when he signed here coming from Buffalo, is that he had injury issues and just didn't have a large workload. So at the time, the expectation was, well, he's going to be splitting time with Swayman anyway. So who cares if he's a guy that gives you 40 plus starts or something like that. Now you look at the way he's playing right now, going to need him a little bit more, whether it's 50-ish games during the regular season or 20 plus games in the playoffs. It gets to that. Like you need him to be healthy and feeling fresh. And to do that, you also need Swayman playing at a high level to, take some of these starts and playing at a high level down the stretch here in the regular season.
And again, I think Montgomery wants to ride one goalie in the postseason. I don't think he wants to do the alternator in the playoffs. I just don't think it's feasible. It hasn't really worked unless one goalie just stinks and the other steps in. Like it doesn't, you don't like usually rotate games in the playoffs. I don't think Montgomery's going to be the one to start that unless he does, which, maybe he does, but I just don't think he will. The one thing I think you're going to hear a little bit, and I've heard it a little from Bruins fans, is, and I don't think I don't see anyone like sounding the horn saying they have to do it, but I think some are saying, should they? Some are saying, should the Bruins think about trading Jeremy Swayman? And this was something that came about last year too. Because someone brought this to my attention after the Arizona game, and I remembered this was brought up a little bit last year because they actually needed pieces. And this was a way people, I think, thought that, they could get around giving up a first round pick. Swayman is a bright young goalie with a really good future, a guy that would replace a first round pick in a trade. There's a couple reasons I wouldn't touch trading Jeremy Swayman. Number one, he's your goalie of the future. That's the guy you get in the system. It's very hard to draft goalies and actually develop them and turn them into something. You have that here. And you also are in no rush to make him the starter. You have Linus Ullmark here. Ullmark's 29. He's got 3 years after this year left on his deal. That's fine. Right now, he doesn't cost you much. He can split time with Ullmark, and he, ultimately can handle a solid workload, even though he's struggling a little bit right now. But also, the Bruins don't really need to get anything big. There's no reason to give up Swayman. What would be the reason? Like, are you getting another, and you also are tight against the cap, and Swayman is not a problem with the cap. So are you getting a top 6 forward? You don't really need one. Are you getting a top tier defenseman? You don't really need one. Are you getting another first round pick? That's not going to help you win a cup this year. So I think you're going to start to hear a little bit of the trading Swayman stuff. And what I would advise people is, I know it's not worth it.
Yeah, I don't think it's worth it. And again, I think it also just comes back to, as you said, the thing that I think grounds most of that in terms of bringing some reality into these trade discussions is the cap. You don't have the cap to take, you don't have the room to take on a lot of guys, especially if it's moving guys like that. You want to move a guy like DeBrusk or what have you? Sure, I don't think you should move him because he's playing great right now. I was looking at, I think the latest, I think it was the player cards from Dom Lucian where he goes through, how like with the percentile ranks for some players. DeBrusk has like a WAR of like 2.9 this year in terms of, especially defensively. I think he's in like the 98th percentile. Helps that he's playing with Bergeron. That is true.
And they have him killing penalties.
Yeah, but like he's been like a very valuable two-way weapon this year, not just for the Bruins, but if you look at just what he brings in terms of guy that is on pace for 25, 30 goals again with his two-way play, he's been very, very valuable. So like that's a guy you probably have to move if you're trying to bring in another big contract. I feel like Bruins fans would be a lot more hesitant about that than maybe a guy like Swayman, who some Bruins fans think might be, stalled or expendable, but I just don't see Swayman being a guy worth moving. Again, if you have a situation where in another year or two, you have another young goalie in the system, whether it's like Brendan Busey or you look at like Philip Svedebek, who's been pretty solid in Providence, if he takes a step forward, then you maybe reevaluate down a year or two down the road as Swayman's still kind of struggling a little bit, but I don't see this being a situation now where, again, I don't think the way this team's going, I don't think now should be the time to augment your roster quite a bit.
No.
Right? I feel like you don't really do too much with this roster right now, the way it's playing, barring injuries or something really kind of going awry, I don't see the Bruins necessarily looking at this team being like, this team that's really tight knit and is going on a warpath.
And this goalie hug.
Yeah, I feel like we already did a little bit too much earlier this year. Let's just take a step back. Let's just let it play out.
Well, that's the thing. Again, I think that's another thing people have to consider is, I don't think trading players off this roster is a great idea. Because again, after Bruce Cassidy was fired and they wanted someone as a head coach who was more morale based and nice, I don't think it's a great idea to trade players off this roster, because they're all close and it's working. What would be the reason to and again, I don't know where you're clearly upgrading. Again, we'll discuss all this trading stuff later down the road as the trade deadline kind of hits. Because again, we both said this, other teams are going to make big moves. And I think Bruins fans are going to kind of sit here and go, wait a second, why is my team not doing anything? And we're here to tell you, well, it's always nice to get depth pieces and all that, but you've already given up enough firsts. Your team is the way it is. It's very good. There's not really a need to go out and get a big fish, and there just isn't. Even if the Rangers go out and get Patrick Kane, or the Lightning will somehow do something that is big, it's okay. It's okay. You don't need to trade away your future goalie and Jeremy Swayman. Anyways, Connor, what could people look forward to from you?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have you cover every step of the way in terms of Bruins coverage over at BSJ. So please subscribe over there. We'll have game reports, columns, features, all that good stuff. You want to follow me on Twitter? You can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan, Evan Marinofsky, you Bruins Beat listeners. Have a great rest of your week.